What is happening? Some more drama in the injury department this weekend on some big names, but we're going to talk about a little bit about that one specifically, and then just hit a couple waiver pieces, and we'll do another episode later this week with a little bit more of our reaction of the weekend itself and everything. But first and foremost, this is Live Good DyNasty. My name is Arlen, and this is Nate. How you doing, Nate?
Yo, week 4, doing pretty good. We got 2 Monday Night Football games coming up as we're talking about waivers. So excited that they're doing this doubleheader thing on Mondays. It makes me feel like
You like
football
it.
goes for longer. I like it just because it just keeps football extending longer and longer. Makes Monday more relevant. And when you only have one game and you're playing somebody that's got one player and you don't have anyone playing, you feel like everything's out of your control. So 4
Sure.
games playing on a Monday night, you feel like there's a little bit more going on. Extends
That's a good
the
point.
fantasy week for everybody.
Now, do you prefer Friday edition that they did for week 1, and they did one Monday night and then they did a Friday? Do you prefer the Friday and Monday, or do you prefer 2 Mondays?
I prefer 2 Mondays, I think. That's a little selfish, as my son plays high school football. I'd rather be available to watch football games.
Well, I mean, they should consider it.
They should, right? Like, I'd rather them overtake college until my son's in college, and then they can go back to Friday nights. So Saturdays for now, and then
yeah, cool. All right, yeah, we'll talk to them. But either way, I want to give a shout out to everyone, because we had a good week, and we're in terms of like subscribers, people joining, people commenting, had a lot of great conversations from our last week's episode. So just as a reminder, it super helps the channel, but also we are on a super modest goal to 100. We're at 63 as of right now, and I would love to come back next week at 70 and say that we are now C students at this of our initial 100 goal. Throw down that subscribe, throw a comment, and have that conversation is the most important piece. So far we have answered or responded to every single comment that's come in, so we always enjoy it.
Yeah, love it. C's do get those degrees, dude, so I'm all for it. And don't forget also that you can go catch us anywhere where you catch your podcasts, or most places you catch your podcasts as well. Ensure that you're checking us out on Apple, Spotify, iHeartRadio, and wherever else we might be buried.
I think Amazon podcasts as well. We're on there. And then if you're listening on one of those, you can check us out on YouTube, youtube.com, Live Good DyNasty. And that's DyNasty, spelled DYNASTY. But we do focus on both in season, like redraft, since there's not a lot of difference in season when we're talking about a player, because that's where our minds are right now, unless you're in a different mode of rebuilding. We're trying to auction some of your players off. It does overlap, and we play both. So you'll hear us talk about both redraft and dynasty, and then we are year round. So during the off season, we would focus more heavily on that dynasty piece. And some of our conversations, like this next one we're going to have about Rashi Rice, we'll have the conversation about dynasty and redraft. So let's have this conversation, get the painful stuff out of the way right away. Rashi Rice, they've already ruled him out for week 5. That's obvious. He's going to miss more than that. He got friendly fire, if you don't know. Mahomes rolled up on him, and I can only imagine how he would feel as the quarterback, throwing an interception, then going low on somebody and hitting his own top wide receiver and top weapon while they're already hurting with Pacheco out. So it said feared ACL tear, which would put him out until about this time next year, and then he would work his way back in and be several weeks after that. So you would really be counting him on that playoff run at the end of the year next year. Whew, that sucks, man. That was a big hit.
Yeah, I was obviously as our resident Chargers fan, I was watching the game pretty closely, and just to see that, it was nasty to happen, and you could tell he knew he was going to be out for a little bit. He was upset, hung the towel over his head as he was carted off. It was going to be a rough one, and he, leading into this week, was one of the leading wide receivers, kind of the surprises this early start of the early season so far, at least for where you drafted him. So,
14 targets the game before.
Yeah, it's insane. He's getting everything that used to go to one wide receiver plus Travis Kelce for the most part for the first 3.5 games or so. So it's a bummer to see. It happened in their first offensive series, so he never even got his hands on the ball, and it was rough to watch. But now it's time to talk about, we always care about the player, but it's time to talk about what do you do in this situation now if you were riding high with him as your potentially drafted him as your number 2 receiver, but he was playing wide receiver 1 for you.
So I'm in a keeper league that I have him in. That it's a keeper league where you keep him for whatever round they were drafted in. So I kept him he was drafted as a rookie last year, and I got to keep him for a 13th rounder. And for me, I was like, okay, this is my, famously, Devontae Adams is one of the people that are still on the original roster in that keeper league. You only get to keep one, but I was like, this is my Devontae Adams, and I have him for so long. And it did bring up the question for me of, is it worth the wait now with such a large injury in a keeper? Not DyNasty, but a keeper league. The question really is do I put him and do I take up one of those IR spots for the rest of the year now, just for the option to keep him next year? I don't know what the answer is there yet.
Yeah.
But it seems really hard to convince myself because he's not going to be normal next year, I don't think, if it is an ACL tear.
Yeah, I mean, it's really early to tell. A lot of speculation going into not sure about what the injury and the depth of that injury is. But yeah, we haven't seen, folks come back from that and be right out the gate, especially for a wide receiver who relies on being able to pivot, being able to cut out in their routes and whatnot. So it'll be longer than when he's available, right?
And then when he's available, you mentioned it earlier that the injury is not the only looming thing.
So we all, whatever was going on in the off season, we had the looming suspension potentially coming up. So we don't know if that's come in, or if that will still impact next year, or do they hold it back? Does the NFL hold it back once all the legal proceedings are out of the way until he's actually playable? So many factors going in. So yeah, if you are in a situation where you have him in your lineup, depending on the type of league we're talking about, you've got some decisions to make down the line here.
Yeah. One of the things that I mentioned right before we started recording is in redraft, and you have fab system, would you throw out 15-20% of your fab while the news, because just no one knows yet. No one has the final answer. I did hear Pro Football Doc, who's on Twitter, and he's a doctor that knows a lot about sports injuries and a lot of his kind of assessments. He watches the tape and kind of breaks it down, and he's pretty accurate in his first initial feel was that it's not an ACL tear, how it hit. And he mentioned a couple different words that had too many syllables for me to remember. But it was a 4 to 5 week thing he was saying. He said he wouldn't be shocked if it was an ACL tear, but his initial review of the tape didn't make him feel like it was. So that being said, he's worthless in redraft if he's out all season, obviously. But do I then throw a 15-20% fab offer that expires at the end of today and say to the owner that hey, if you want to get something for him and take that risk to cash out. I don't know. I think I might actually do that in a couple of leagues and see how that goes.
Yeah, I mean, it's not surprising that you would take that route anyway, because that's the type of trader that you are, getting it out there and just taking risks, because you never know what's going to happen. If you're doing really well in your league and you can hold out a spot for the playoffs and there's a potential for him to come back, I think it's a fun, risky move to make. Don't know that I would make it, but it makes total sense to do it.
You have a Rashi Rice, let's say, and I sent that offer right now. Would you take that offer?
For $20 of fab in a redraft league? No, I'd rather
20%.
Or 20% of your fab in a redraft league, depending on my roster construction and how I'm set up for the rest of the year. I might take it, but probably not. If I'm doing well and I have a wide receiver on the bench, I'm going to hold on to that roster spot because I will hope that he's there for me in the playoffs. But if I'm kind of in the middle of the pack right now and I need to replace him on my roster, I could potentially make that move.
And then, so I'm assuming then, because it felt like you're a hold, so I'm assuming then if you don't have an IR spot to put him in and waivers are hitting, and it's still in this same position where we don't know, but it sounds like it's an ACL tear, are you just holding him and taking the L on the waiver week, or are you dropping him?
I'm taking the L on the waiver week. If we don't know before tomorrow night, and I'm relatively confident we'll know before tomorrow night. But if we don't know before tomorrow night, then I'll take the Allen waiver.
Yeah. And now in DyNasty, where are you with him? If you can get a good deal right now, And same kind of theory of like take the risk that it's not as bad as it seems like it is. Because I mean, long term, I think 2026 is when you're going to be, or end of 2025, if he's not suspended during that time, then you'll get to use him if it is an ACL tear. So you're a couple of years of his career just got erased. And
this is so bleak.
Like it is, but it is, but it's unknown right now. So usually you know so fast. So this unknown piece makes me feel like I should send an offer out for Rashi Rice, but I don't know as the owner of Rashi Rice or the manager if you're going to be able to make a decision right now, or if you're just like wait.
In this scenario right now where we're at, if we don't know and someone threw me an offer, no one is going to offer me the amount that I would want to get to let him go. Right.
Okay.
Like he's more expensive than he's worth even with that risk right now. Once you do know though, because like what you just talked about, like thinking 2 years out, and that I play DyNasty in a 3-year cycle, and the uncertainty, I'd probably take a deal today. After we know like he's going to be out for a year plus, he'll return to play in maybe 18 months or 12 months, but the return to peak performance will probably be much longer than that. So all of that in mind, like I'm probably more susceptible to take trade offers once we have that news and be more reasonable about it. But while there's if I can get someone that is convinced that, or they think that they have a shot to get him back before the end of the year in a redraft, or he has a shot to come back next year and they believe in the talent and for some reason don't think a suspension is looming and they're depending on him for 2025, I'm making that deal because I can probably get more than he's worth in that situation.
Yeah, I think that's fair. Now, there are some fantasy implications. We'll be talking about some waiver pickups for different positions, but I guess, are there anyone specifically that you would want to hit from a Rashi Rice perspective of the Kansas City Chiefs? Who's interesting to take some of those targets that we're obviously going to lose from him? We got Worthy, who's not a waiver, and the person who has them right now is not selling them for cheap. So
right.
But we've got I think Noah Gray is a good example of, he kind of got a little bit of an uptick, and he might, as a tight end, you might want to grab him, or possibly even Kareem Hunt, who was the running back after Steele fumbled, and he's a pass catching running back. P. Ryan is as well. Who do you think that this is really going to save the day, or is it someone that's not even there yet?
Well, I think one thing, from not a waiver perspective, I think this will help a resurgence, hopefully, of a little bit more of what Travis Kelce owners were expecting coming into the year. Maybe he gets a little bit more back involved in this game. Someone that we saw benefit a little bit when Rashi was out of the game for a little bit a couple weeks ago. Juju is there. And this is kind of the role that he had prior to leaving for New England or wherever he left for after. Right, he had that route running specialist, kind of mid-level targets, kind of the target eater out there. So definitely could see Juju taking it in. If he's still got the legs for it, we don't know. We'll see here in a little bit. I don't see Worthy being someone that's going to, increase targets. He's that speedster guy going over the top, and they're going to find creative ways to use him and maybe use him more frequently, but I don't see him jumping up to 10, 11 targets a game. So it's got to be one of those guys. Sky Moore got a little bit more involved yesterday after Rashi went out, but he was dropping passes and ones that were right in his hands, so we don't know who's going to end up with.
Yeah, so we have, I think Juju's he's about 35% owned in DyNasty, so he might even be available in your DyNasty, and he's almost not owned at all, and he's just probably available in your redraft. Yeah. So, I mean, it's not bad to take a flyer on it. I personally probably wouldn't. I would do it in DyNasty. I don't think I would do it in redraft. I think Gray, though, who's he's also rostered 35%, and then in DyNasty and 2% in redraft. But if this is a weird year for tight ends, where I feel like Noah Gray would be a fine addition to throw onto your back of your bench and just see what happens over the next few weeks.
Yeah. There's a lot of options there. We'll talk about tight ends eventually, so I got a whole spiel about how I'm feeling about that right now.
All right. Well, let's jump into the first grouping of waiver wires, and this would be people who, just as a reminder to check if they're there. With people, so many injuries, people have had to drop some people that they probably wouldn't have otherwise, because they were on IR and they started the season on IR. So some people that are coming back soon, at least eligible to come back, and then check specifics on, like, I feel like Nick Chubb, for example, he's starting to practice. Brooks starting to practice, but these are some of the people that started this year on IR that were drafted, and then stashed in people's IRs that they may have had to make some room for. So Hockenson is one of them. At the beginning of the year, I was thinking about Hockenson and like, oh, okay, let me set a reminder to pick him up. Or I was thinking like I would send him. I was thinking about setting a reminder to pick him up near this time, but I don't think the bounce back is going to be solid. But then Sam Darnold is doing extremely well. Yeah, apparently he's him. And I'm a little bit more okay with picking up, and especially this year with the tight ends, how they've been. So Hockenson is coming back. Clyde Edwards-Helaire is coming back. We know the situation in Kansas City. Chubb is coming back. Brooks, Kendre Miller, and Kendre Miller, I only, like, if you're the Kamara owner, I would consider that. And then we've got Ricky Pearsall, which I know you always laugh when I bring him up. But that's a good back of the bench player that I want to see what happens, because he's had so much opportunity in this week that he was not here, or this month that he was not here, to where he could have ascended. But welcome back, Pearsall.
Yeah.
Anyone else that I'm not thinking of that you that started on injured reserve that's coming back that you would, or anybody, one of these that you would consider kind of targeting or trading for or picking up if they're there?
Yeah, I mean, Hawkinson's a good call out. The only one, the one that I think I would lean on is a CEH, just because he's not coming back. I think we talked about this before. He's not coming back recovering from anything physical, and he's jumping into a situation where it's kind of anyone's backfield to take over. Steele lost a fumble yesterday. P. Ryan's not like lighting up the stat sheet either. So this was previously CEH's job. So he potentially could jump right in and maybe show something off. So that's one I'd consider. And then I would have said Jonathan Brooks, but Chuba, I know you like to hate on the guy, but Chuba's looking good the last couple weeks. Andy Dalton's resurrecting some folks. So
yeah, he's looking really good. He's looking a lot better than I thought he would. And I think the 50-50 splits, or 60-40 with Brooks being 60, I think it's going to last longer than what I thought. I thought he was going to fully take it over. But I still see by the end of the year, Brooks owning that backfield. You don't take somebody that high and not utilize him aggressively.
Yeah.
So I think as long as he's healthy to come back and he's feeling good, I think he'll take more and more of that over. And again, they're probably not on your a few of these players are probably not on your waiver, but I've seen some players hit the waiver that I'm shocked with, when people have 3 injured, 4 injured players, and they just need to get bodies on their team that can play now, because it's easy to say I'm going to keep this player and wait for them to come back, but then when you're 0-4, you've got to just start making moves.
Yeah, 100%.
All right, speaking of the god that is Sam Darnold, apparently he's probably owned by now, but he's still only 65% owned in redraft, and he's the number 4 quarterback on the year. He just keeps doing it. He keeps doing it every week, and if he's available there, like, definitely throw him on your bench. Or start him, I guess. He's the number 4. I even said put him on your bench. This mental block for me is still there. It's really hard to get over, and I think that's the only reason why he's available still.
Yeah, sorry I got distracted with some of the stats here, but no one saw what this kid was going to do coming into this year, and I think they throughout the camp he wasn't even the number 1 coming in, or the assumed number 1. He eventually was the only guy taking the number 1 snaps, and he saw the opportunity he had coming into the year, and it's just showing off like what great coaching, what great situations can do. I will say, Justin Jefferson being him is really helping Sam Darnold out, because you see some of these catches he's making, and most other receivers are dropping those or not catching those. So for sure, that's definitely some help there. But yeah, Sam Darnold is showing off. One that is on here that that we are going to jump into here eventually. Justin Fields is owned in 42% of leagues. I don't think. Do you think he lets go? Do you think Wilson's going to come in and get the job once he's fully healthy?
I think he is fully healthy. And they've said that they're going to keep rolling with him if they're winning. They lost by just 3 points, and he looked bad in the beginning of the game, but he brought it back and really carried the team.
Yeah,
he looks good enough to keep the job, in my opinion.
Yeah.
And so I had him in a league that I didn't draft a quarterback until the 15th round in redraft, and I was kind of messing around with a couple. I picked him up, dropped him, and then I dropped all my like backup running or quarterbacks while I was trying to figure out. I had a couple of them just to see who hits, and I'm locked in on Justin Fields there, and that's how I'm feeling with him. From a dynasty perspective, it's a good rental. It's not gonna last. He's not gonna. He didn't figure it out. Tomlinson is just a great coach, and they're figuring out how to use him, and they're telling him what not to do. I think we've talked about before of just where don't do those specific things that get you in trouble, and then the rest of it's manageable, and he can put a game plan around Justin Fields. So I think it sticks for a little bit, at least another few weeks. But he's got Dallas, who can do something. I don't know what they are yet, but then they've got Vegas, who seems to be playing really, really well. Jets that are playing well. The Giants, I don't know if they're really playing that well. That just made me think Locke might be an option too that I didn't even put on here. I was traveling this weekend. I told you, so some of the stuff I was missing. Did they really say that they're suiting him up, right? Drew Locke, who is 29% rostered in DyNasty, negative 3% rostered in redraft, I'm sure.
I didn't catch that, so I'd have to go back and look. But yeah, that's something to think about too. I will say, just to put a bow back on Justin Fields here, best game, and it all was basically in the second half, but best game he's had so far. 312 passing yards, 10 rushing attempts for 55 yards, and 2 touchdowns. Looking designed out there, so they're using him in that way. So, like, I'm not saying he's not that far removed from being one of the best quarterbacks available when he was with Chicago, and from a fantasy perspective. So I think he's someone that you roll with, and if he's out there, I would go grab him, especially if you're in a situation where there's this like really sucky, tough quarterback that everyone drafted really high. This guy named Patrick Mahomes. It's like
who just lost some people, I heard.
Yeah, he's without his number one target so far this year, and the guy still has not scored over 17 points for you. He's not who you drafted.
I think he's a drop for me. Is that too aggressive?
That's
to say that like I would drop him for Justin Fields.
Yeah, if you're in a one quarterback league and you don't have the roster spot, I don't hate it. If you've got the roster spot, he's a hold for me. Because he's in my like wait and see jail, right?
Yeah,
like he's in the spot. I'm keeping him on my bench. But
it's been 2 years,
right? What's that?
It's been 2 years really for the most part, or like
yeah.
Most of last year and this year that he hasn't scored an acceptable amount of points for a starting quarterback. If he didn't have that name, he wouldn't have started. And Justin Fields, on the other hand, has hit a point where we kind of knew it last year, but seeing on a different team now is really just how long is he going to keep the starting role. But he's now, if he plays, he's an every week start because of his rushing ability.
Yeah, 100%. So yeah, if you can go get him, only 42% rostered in redraft right now, so he might be out there. And to be honest, like, you might have to drop a good amount of fab to get him, but I would do that.
Yeah, if you're in that spot and you need it and you feel shored up everywhere else, I'm a big fan of dropping your fab earlier in the season. You get longer time with those players, and those players usually on average score more per game from when they're picked up and when they're the main waiver ad in the beginning of the season than the ones that are out there later on. All right, so a couple other quarterbacks. If Flacco might have some time, but just keep an eye on it. Like, he might be a just throw on if you're the Richardson owner. I wish he was just. He's 3% owned in redraft, Dynasty 27%, so you can probably get him in Dynasty too. And he should be owned in Dynasty either way. When he comes on, he can. He's not going to break the world, but what I think most importantly, he really enhances like Downs, Pittman, the players around him.
Yeah.
But he's more confident and did better than Anthony Richardson, which I have a lot of questions around for another time.
Yeah, for sure.
And then we've got Tyler Huntley is somebody that you picked up, and yeah, I like this one a lot. Of Tyler Huntley, picking him up for if they haven't played yet. So if he's on your waiver and you're listening to this, if I post it in time, you can grab him now and just stash him and see how he does. And you're playing him in one of the leagues, but yeah, he's 50% in DyNasty.
Yeah, if you got some roster flexibility, I'm excited. We've seen what he can do. He was 3-6 when he's played in when he started in Baltimore. He's got the legs, and he can YOLO that pass a little bit. And so hopefully we see some pass catchers come back to life a little bit here in Miami. So it's exciting. I'm all about that risk because I am struggling in the quarterback position in our DyNasty league. So I was happy to pick him up last week as soon as I saw the announcement, hold on to him. And as soon as I saw he's starting, I quickly put him into my starting lineup, knowing that my starter was injured and probably wouldn't last the whole game. I was wrong about lasting the whole game, but he did not do well. Justin Herbert, I'm talking about.
I'll throw one last bonus person in, just back your bench in DyNasty. I think it's time to pick up Jameis Winston, and he's 37% rostered. I would just throw him on the back of your bench. I don't want to explain all of my reasons as a Browns fan because it makes me sad, but looming suspensions and poor quarterback play might be a part of it. And he's one of the most fun ones. He's one of the most fun bad quarterbacks to have in fantasy.
We've talked about that before.
Let's move on. Let's move on to waiver for wide receivers for waiver. Allen Lazard is surprising. I keep thinking I keep trying to sell him because it's like there's no way that they're going to target him this much again. Like it's just a fluke, and then it happens again. But he's 48%. I think for me, he's the Sam Darnold of wide receivers. He's currently on the year. He's doing really well, and he keeps getting targeted, but I just keep waiting for it to disappear. He's the number 16 wide receiver on the year. And he's only 84% rostered in DyNasty, so he's probably gone. But in redraft, he's under 50% at 48%. So I think that one is. I wouldn't spend a ton on him because I still don't believe it, I guess. But if you want to throw a couple bucks just to increase the likelihood you get it.
Yeah, I mean, if you're trying to build depth and not someone that's here every week starter, but could be a flex as we're getting into bye weeks here. Bye weeks are starting week 5. High alert for all you folks out there in fantasy world. So as the bye weeks are starting, you need someone. His bye isn't till week 12, so you'd have someone there, and he's got the early season at least connection with his boy Aaron Rodgers, and I think there's a lot to be said about the relationships built there and Aaron's trust in Lazard. So wouldn't be starting him, but someone to definitely put on the bench for sure.
Another one like that with like a bye week that's a little further out, week 10, so you get a few more weeks while you're dealing with your early buys. Trey Tucker, he's 19% owned. He seems to have a bit of a chemistry, and he's 2 weeks in a row. He's done really well, caught more than 7 receptions with 9 and 6 targets. So he seems to be a little bit more involved than what we originally thought he'd be. He seems to be doing good.
Yeah, Trey Tucker definitely put a role in there for himself. Now, of course, Devontae Adams wasn't playing this past weekend, so inflates it a little bit, but he actually had a better week the week before when Adams was out there. So he definitely has a role in this offense. He's had 9 targets last week, 6 targets this week. So
yeah, and last week, Devontae Adams still had 9 targets. So it wasn't just that he was there and was either banged up or just not vibing. He had the targets, he had the receptions, but Trey Tucker still was the man there.
Yeah, and then even going into next week, if you're picking him up, even if Adams is back, I forget what injury we're dealing with here, but they're playing Denver, so I'd imagine Adams is going to get the Surtain treatment. So Trey Tucker might be out there catching passes again.
Another week 10 bye week player who is under 20% rostered in redraft is, we talked a little bit about this last week about Jordan Love coming back and grabbing some of those Green Bay wide receivers. So Wicks at 18%. He had a fantastic week, but don't get fully lost in the 2 touchdowns. But at the same time, he was targeted 13 times. So he had a smash play. He had 12 points. It's just from the touchdowns themselves. But at the same point, he's been one of the favorites immediately again with Wicks. Reed is probably almost obviously owned, but too high to trade for target wise. he's getting the majority. But then we also have Doubs, who didn't look like he was doing as solid when you just look at the end of the game fantasy point total, but he was targeted 8 times. So he's still, his targets went way up too. So I think any of these guys that are out there on the waiver wire, if you need some waiver or some bench depth at wide receiver, those two are excellent ones to add.
Yeah, especially when it clears up a little bit with Christian Watson being out on injury. You're going to see an uptick with these guys. Watson with a high ankle sprain this past over the weekend here. So I definitely, if of the bunch, even though Doubs greater as far as has been on more rosters, I think Wicks is the one that you want
coming
out.
He's got a higher upside.
Yeah, for sure.
Downs, another one with some pretty good upside. He had 9 targets, 8 receptions, 82 yards. He got the touchdown in it as well. He has a pretty narrow. It's a lot of the shorter work, a lot across the middle, but he's getting all of those easy dump off pieces, and Flacco loved him. So I would say Downs absolutely has to do with Flacco, but he's good. He had just come back from injury too, so he's still worth the stash. Even if Anthony Richardson, it wasn't only that Flacco was there; it was Flacco was there, and he had another game in to kind of get his footing and get right. So it might be more consistent than we feel like it is.
Yeah, Downs.
Because I'm a little worried with Anthony Richardson coming back, what would happen to him, but I still think it's worth it.
Yeah, I mean, Downs walked away from the game with the same amount of targets as Michael Pittman. Pittman, congratulations for getting Flacco, getting you more involved in the game. But yeah, I think Downs is someone to look at either way. I think he's to your point, the dump off city, which is what I think Anthony Richardson needs.
Yeah,
when he comes back, so that might be helpful.
You got several more weeks with the wide receivers for the Rams too. Tutu Atwell, you've got Demarcus Robinson. Even Whittington finally started getting a little bit more involved this last weekend. So those are some great players to kind of throw in. And a lot of these players here, there's a couple that stand out. Wicks, I think, is probably my favorite of the group, just because his situation isn't changing compared to and maybe Lazard, but I have a bias apparently with that. But Trey Tucker, Devontae Adams, we talked about, so that could change it. Downs, you've got Anthony Richardson, might bring it way back down to earth. And then it's still mucky with the Rams wide receivers. But for most of these wide receivers, I'm okay with putting down super low fab bids and just seeing which one I end up getting. I think that would be a fair approach, because they're all similar level to me outside of maybe Wicks.
Yeah, for sure. One that you don't have on the list here for wide receivers, I'm just going to double down on from last week. He's only 45% owned in redraft right now.
Yeah.
Wondell Robinson.
Yeah, you brought that up hard last week. That was a great call out.
Yeah, so someone that I think is gonna, he's got the talent, but never showed when Daniel Jones didn't have any other options. He never showed he could be the guy, but he can be the other guy. It showed up really well this past week, right? With Malik, with how he's playing with Malik Neighbors, he's drawing so much attention. Malik Neighbors is going to get his, obviously, but with Robinson came up with I think 18 points this past week, 13 points this past week. Against Dallas, had 11 receptions on 14 targets, 71 yards. So someone to pick up on. To be perfectly frank, I would watch Malik. I would go grab him, because when he's playing with Malik, I think he's a lot better. If Malik is out, I think actually lower expectations for how Wondell will perform. Because we've seen that before. But yeah, I think he's someone else that you should really be grabbing. Again, only 45% rostered.
Perfect. I also might have dreamt that Daniel Jones was getting benched. I haven't really seen any of that, and I have a clear memory of it from this weekend. So, all right. So running backs, Rico Dowdle, 56%. So he's probably owned in redraft, but if he's still available, he seems like he's going to be a very consistent, playable running back, and right now that is everything. Justice Hill at 28% got a little bit more involved, and I think as the season goes on, I think that it's going to be a little bit more balanced, and that's with Henry going off, and he was still able to find the room, and there's that clear dynamic between pass catching running back and bruiser there. How do you feel about Justice Hill?
Yeah, so it's his involvement in the passing game for me, right? With the way that the Ravens are playing the game right now, and we'll talk about this when we get to tight ends, probably part of my rant, but tight ends are not a part of their game planning at all right now. So a lot of the medium, deep, mediocre, and even Zay Flowers, our wide receivers aren't getting a ton either, because you've got a freight train style runner out of Derrick Henry, right? You've got the ability for Lamar Jackson to be super wily. All he needs is a dump off outlet or someone that can catch passes out of the backfield as well, and Justice Hill, and they're going to use him that way. I think he had 6 receptions caught, and they were all 6 of his targets this past weekend. And he looked good doing it. Some of the things that he was doing out there, clearly has a role in this. I'm not saying it's going to be what we've talked about before with him being another wide receiver in this running back thing, but I think he's definitely got some shot to be relevant on your roster. And again, bye-week fill-ins are coming in and needed, and he's got a definite role on this team.
Yeah, I also think within at this point of the season, it's good to start throwing in like your handcuffs in there. So if you're the Henry owner, like week 5, 6 is usually when I start looking at the ones that are a little bit more apparent.
Mm-hmm.
If you could play a running back and they're at the Dowdle level, and Dowdle's like the starter and he's at the same as Justin Hill pretty much. But if you have that kind of startable, flex-worthy running back that has enough upside if the star in front of them goes down, that's when I'll throw a decent amount of fab on to get in, especially because for Justice Hill, like they matched it and they gave him an extension. So they matched how they're playing with him, and like he seems like he's an important part of the plan. And then they gave him an in-season extension. So I think that just speaks volumes to they want him to continue to be a big part of the plan.
For sure.
Tank Bigsby with ETN banged up a little bit is a good player to add. I think we spoke. That was one of our recommendations last week too, to pick up as well. And one person that we definitely did not mention, but I mean, you might as well throw him on your bench and see what happens. I wouldn't spend fab on it, but McNichols had a couple touchdowns and came out of nowhere. And hey, why not? I guess.
Yeah, I mean, why not? I guess is the best way to put it. I think this has more to do with Eckler being not available for the game than it does 100%. Anything else. So definitely watch and see how long Eckler's going to be sidelined for. But 38% of the snaps for McNichols, so he's not being used. So see what happens.
Speaking of like a backup that might get a little bit of a boost, another sad one, Jonathan Taylor going down.
Yep.
Trey Sermon in both redraft and DyNasty. In redraft, it's 4%. In DyNasty, even though it's under 50 at 45% rostered. And he saw an immediate uptick when he went out, when Jonathan Taylor went out. But actually, I didn't even... Was it like a mild high ankle sprain? So we're looking at like, 4 to 6 weeks? Is that usually? We were just talking about that last week.
Mid-ankle sprain, which...
Maybe my brain just added the L.
I don't know.
Yeah, okay.
So I didn't know there was anything other than a mid, high or a low. So I read somewhere it was a mid ankle sprain or mid-low ankle sprain. So I would say...
And they aren't considering the injured reserve for
right.
So it's short enough that he might come back, and Sermon which might be a good fill for a couple of weeks as you're dealing with some buys.
Yeah, definitely get someone that's going to jump in and be the guy out the gate, so they feel good about Sermon kind of filling that role. Not saying that they're anywhere near the same player, but maybe Trey Sermon's finally going to get the opportunity to prove that he's the guy that got drafted alongside Trey Lance for the Niners a few years back.
Yeah.
So, he's finally getting that shot that he didn't get
year
in the Niners or with Philadelphia, so we'll see what happens.
All right, and Tucker Kraft, probably owned in DyNasty at 71%, but he's a lot more available at 8% in redraft. So Tucker Kraft had a good week, and Jordan Love came back, so it kind of goes in line for all the same reasons that we were saying. Throw in some wide receivers from that team. I would consider throwing in Kraft as well.
Yeah, definitely some opportunities there for Tucker Kraft. Right now, we talked about Noah Gray. We talked about a few other folks, but we're in a situation where we've gone back-to-back weeks with Mark Andrews having 1 target each game and 0 receptions, we're in a situation where Kyle Pitts scored 0 points this past week. A lot of the guys that you would have had in your top 10 aren't there. So the tight end position is wide open. Let's just throw darts. I think Tucker Kraft definitely got an opportunity there, especially with Christian Watson out and out for a while with a high ankle sprain. There's going to be targets to go around a little bit more, and he's definitely going to take advantage of them.
And we talked about Noah Gray from Kansas City. Kraft is someone, and Gray might be both some, actually all three of these might be a great trade for target in DyNasty. The last person, though, is Erick All. He seems to continue to be involved. And it's not a full surprise, there was some buzz around him in the offseason leading up to it that he might develop faster than the typical rookie. So, he's not breaking fantasy, but he's consistently startable for a position that has some struggles. And if you do that as a rookie in any way in DyNasty, I would love to pay attention to that.
Yeah, I'm in desperation mode at the tight end position as I'm someone that had Hockenson in our DyNasty league, and I've had Erick All on my team, and finally put him in to start. He had 60% of the snaps each of the 3 games, weeks 2, 3, and 4. He's got 4 targets and 4 receptions. Eventually, hopefully, he's going to find his way into the end zone. But what's important there is that he had 60% of the snap, like I said, whereas Gesicki, they only had in for 33% of the snaps this past weekend. So really leaning into Erick All more there in Cincinnati. So definitely someone to grab.
Yeah. All right. I think that's all. Unless there's any other people from any position. I was hoping to say Dotson is a good pickup with having his opportunity with Smith and Brown out, but I don't know what happened after that's a sad one. After his first, his rookie year, he went all the way down. So he didn't do enough to say that. I'm disrespecting fantasy by mentioning his name here. Is there anybody that I should be mentioning that I haven't?
No, I think you covered all the positions we've talked about pretty well. I did happen to notice that we didn't get to kickers. Maybe we're saving that for a later episode. So I'll put that away for now. Even though, the kicker position is kind of breaking fantasy this year, but whatever, however you want to say that.
Yeah, in such a negative way, it's breaking it. We'll skip it this week and all further weeks as well. I have 7 leagues and one, like I've mentioned, only one that has kickers, and I refuse to do any research on which one's the right one to play. I'll take the L on it. I want to dedicate my brain space for something else. But that being said, as a reminder, by this time next week, we are hoping to get up to 70 subscribers on our way to our initial goal of 100. We want to be C students in our initial goal. So if you're watching, you like it, we'll throw out some DyNasty and redraft content throughout the year and about every week during the season itself. Thank you for popping in, and tell us who you were able to grab down below in the comments, or who we forgot to talk about down below, and we'll watch out for those messages. It's good talking to you, Nate. This was our idea. Our idea was 15 minutes of conversation about this, and I don't know how we thought that was going to work when us two are talking fantasy football.
Yeah, you got a problem is that you're just listening to us have the conversations we were going to have anyway, and those are never 10 minutes long.
No, they're not. All right. Well, we'll be back with you later in the week with some more. We'll probably have another 10-minute conversation at some point. But we'll see you next week, this week, whenever we see you, down in the comments below, whenever we see you there. Peace, everybody.
Later.